Well, hi, everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Welcome to what is usually the Joe and Joe weather show, but Joe isn't here. He is still cleaning up from Isaias. He had the power out for a while, I think for over a day, and then he got it back, but just kind of spent the day cleaning up stuff. So the message being said he needs to rest, and I lost my power for 10 hours. It came on about 3 o'clock in the morning, and kind of knew when I woke up and was cold because the air conditioning was running again. I had to grab for a blanket, and the power came back, and the internet was back, but I was wiped yesterday, so I took my break yesterday. So I hope everybody got through safe and sound. I know it's horribly inconvenient to have no power and especially no internet, and then you're sort of thumbing around trying to find something to do. And I actually sat down and read a book for a little while, which is something I haven't done or get to do too often. So the weather is pretty quiet. We're going to just take a look at what's going on. There just really isn't too much happening, but a couple of things that are of note. One is that the tropics are dead quiet at the moment, and they might stay that way for a short time. Looking at the models, we'll take a look at them. Last couple of days, the GFS has been trying to show something coming out from the Caribbean with what looks like a gyre that's going to form there, given the upper pattern. Whether you wind up with something coming up into the Caribbean and eventually going north, or does it uh, move out to the west and go into the Pacific and it develops there, that remains to be seen. But there's nothing in the next 5 days, and the Hurricane Center has indicated that. Now, weather-wise tonight, we are looking at the one hot spot really is in the mid-Atlantic states, and that's where we have flash flood watches up from northeastern Virginia. Johnny Quest messaging me a little while ago saying he picked up another 3 inches or so of rain, and there are some flash flood warnings working. That watch extends into south central and southeastern PA, central and south Jersey, Delaware, and Maryland. One of the big reason, even though the rainfall amounts, when you take a look at what's being forecast now, thunderstorms are going to make a big difference. If you get under a heavy downpour, clearly you're going to wind up with potentially several inches of rain. I don't think that's any surprise given, obviously, the variability of what happens with thunderstorms. But in terms of widespread rainfall out of this, we're not really looking at a whole lot of water. Most rainfall amounts being forecast are generally on the high side. You see some numbers up over an inch to an inch and a quarter or an inch and a half. You can see a couple of hot spots there being indicated by Mount Holly with the inch 1.86 north of Trenton and 2.25 just east of the New Jersey shore. Well, right along the New Jersey shore, from some thunderstorm maybe that's out, they generate that 2.25 because the dot is literally in the ocean. But most of the rainfall amounts are low. The problem is, of course, a lot of these areas picked up half a foot or more of rain just a couple of days ago in less than 48 hours. So the ground is still absolutely saturated. So obviously there's going to be a problem here with regards to flash flooding, and we are already seeing that issue. The radar this evening showing some heavy downpours and thunderstorms. I wouldn't describe this as widespread activity. You got what appears to be a couple of lines of heavy showers and storms cutting across Virginia into North Carolina. We do have a marginal risk of severe weather working in this zone tonight, and some heavy storms now in southeastern Virginia, southern part of Chesapeake Bay, down into the lower part of the Delmarva Peninsula, and then back to the Tennessee, Carolina state line, and some scattered storms down in Georgia, a bit more numerous along coastal Georgia and in northeast Florida, and they become scattered a bit further south. Now, the big question for my zone, from eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England, is this area in here. As it slides out to the east-northeast, it's probably going to turn a little more northeast with time. We do have a wave that's developing on a stalled frontal boundary, And you can see it here on the surface map, on the 21Z surface map. Got this stalled front offshore, and there's a little ripple there in western North Carolina that's going to make its way to the northeast, and that's our issue for later tonight and tomorrow morning in the flash flood watch zone and in areas north and east of there, that we're going to have an area of rain and downpours. Same thing happened last Friday, and they came up, I believe it was Thursday night into Friday morning. I think you're going to see the same thing happen for tonight. And meanwhile, we've got a high in Michigan extending over to Lake Ontario, so that's sort of created an onshore flow, and it helped to hold the temperatures down a bit today. Although the dew point relief was not what I was hoping for. The dew point relief that we got out of this was minimal from New York City on south, if it even was there at all as you went south of New York City. I'm just trying to find where my hazards map is, what I did with it. There it is. So, looking at dew points as you go north of New York City, it was a reasonable day. The dew points got down into the low 60s. You see some really nice dew points in the 50s across upstate New York and into Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. A perfectly lovely day from that respect. But head down into central and south Jersey, particularly across southern Pennsylvania and down into Maryland and Delaware, and you got dew points in the low 70s. So the low level humidity is just really high. No relief was able to bleed down from the north. And of course, now you've got light easterly winds and that frontal boundary with that little wave developing on it. And the outcome is that we have these showers and thunderstorms. And here's the risk area from the Storm Prediction Center, showing a marginal risk from northern Georgia right up into Virginia and Maryland. And that cluster there that's in Virginia and Maryland is somewhat problematic. And the going forward, no issues in the east other than general thunderstorm activity that might be running around tomorrow. We do have a slight risk up in North Dakota and in northeastern Minnesota, and a marginal risk across South Dakota and into the rest of Minnesota. Otherwise, that's it for severe weather risk for tomorrow, Friday. Saturday, the risk shifts South Dakota to Nebraska, marginal risk a little bit further to the east. And we do have the Storm Prediction Center showing a risk area in Minnesota to Wisconsin on day 4, and this is for Sunday and Sunday night. So we're looking at a 15% risk. So that would be a slight risk of severe weather in much of Minnesota, Wisconsin, northern Iowa, eastern half of South Dakota, down into Nebraska, and a small portion of southeastern North Dakota. So that pretty much takes care of the risk zone. And as far as I said with the tropics, just to show you here, we've got tropical cyclone activity not expected for the next 48 hours. No tropical cyclones running around anywhere. We've got no tropical cyclones expected during the next 5 days. I'll bring up the loop here. We'll bring up the satellite loop. And here we go. So we'll use the Atlantic wide view here. I mean, we do have wave action off the coast of Africa, south and west of the Cabo Verde Islands. It doesn't look like anything overly exciting there. There's a couple of weak waves moving across to the west. I would hardly describe them as being organized at all. A little bit of a flare up in the northwest Caribbean into the Gulf of Mexico. There's an upper trough that's there, so we're not expecting much to come out of that. And it's quiet everywhere else across the subtropical Atlantic. So again, it looks like we're going to be in a bit of a break mode here. I'm sure the atmosphere is going to rev up again in a week or two, and we'll have some tropical systems that we'll be tracking. But in the meantime, things are fairly quiet. So I'll bring up the upper air and take a look. I have to tell you, with all the time I spent with the tropical system with Isaias, that I haven't really looked at the long range much at all in the last week or so. But I did mention and a couple of times that it looks like we're going to go back to this sort of narrow east-west, what I would describe as a flat ridge. But just backing up to Monday, what we had Monday with the upper air is how storms come up the East Coast. But what really stood out was the depth of this upper trough. I mean, you just don't get troughs that deep and that far south down into the Gulf states in the early part of August. Maybe in later September, definitely during the month of October. But to see a trough like this was very unusual. And of course, we had the tropical storm or hurricane Isaias when it approached North Carolina, got caught up in that trough. And remember, as these gears kind of shift around, everything timed out perfectly here for the storm to move up the East Coast. And the fact that we had what we refer to as baroclinic deepening. In other words, the storm starts to react in a way as a non-tropical low does, and starts to intensify. In this case, it just basically was able to maintain itself as a strong tropical storm as it moved rapidly northward. We got the 4 to 6 hours of really rough weather. I'm sure I had gusts to 70 miles an hour or higher with the tree damage that we had in my neighborhood. My street was completely blocked off. I couldn't get out at all until yesterday morning when they had cleared one down tree. The other one pulled down power lines, and I had to wait for the electric folks to come by, which they did and took care of it. Now, of course, that trough is now long lifted out, and we see the rebuilding of the ridge. And as I said, it's this sort of very long, narrow east-west ridge that covers the southern half of the United States and the subtropical Atlantic. A ridge like this, if it's a little bit further to the north, this one extends down into the northern Gulf of Mexico. If this ridge pushes up a little bit further to the north, that's going to create lower than normal pressures down in the Caribbean. So that's probably the reason why you may have seen the models, the GFS in particular, in its long range trying to rev something up there late in the forecast period. But going forward, the pattern is going to be dominated here next week. Again, the northern part of that jet stream extending just south of there's your east-west ridge. I moved the maps over along about 3 days worth, and you notice that the ridge just kind of holds. And then you've got this pretty much a westerly flow across the northern Pacific, across the northern part of the United States. Then it kind of pulls up into eastern Canada a little bit, and then runs straight out in the Atlantic. So there'll be some weather fronts that'll try to approach and try to come through. If there's a short wave in this mix that's a little stronger, there might be one late next week. You can see it here. This trough is coming on through. There's another trough that's coming into the northwest, and particularly up in Canada. The upper high in the Atlantic out here. You've got another upper high down in the southwest. Yet another one north of Hawaii. Those, at least this summer, those seem to be kind of semi-permanent features there. And in the long range, we continue along. We're now at day 8 or 9. Still looks pretty much the same. Got a little system that comes out of the Pacific here, if we want to believe it, right there, heading out to the northwest. There's been only one hurricane going into this would be later on. This is right at August 17th, so August 16th. We're talking about already through the first week of August, and we've only had one hurricane in the East Pacific Basin, which is phenomenally inactive. And now we've got a couple of them that the GFS is starting to generate here, moving westward. Of course, they're all fish storms. And in the meantime, nothing really changes in terms of the upper air features in the U.S. The ridge, if it's strong enough, then when that happens, that could bring some 90-degree weather or a little bit higher. I don't see anything really overly extreme, but we could certainly see some days where it's very warm to borderline hot and humid going forward. And again, if there's a short wave in that northern stream that could come along and move on through, bring in a little bit of relief as far as some dry air is concerned, we'll catch that in the short range. So looking at the U.S. map here, starting with tonight and tomorrow. The GFS doesn't seem to be really doing a good job in picking up the showers and storms that are going on in Virginia. The NAM today does show that area in eastern Virginia, and it worked well last week in this instance. You see those showers in eastern Virginia just kind of turning north and flaring up early tomorrow morning in parts of New Jersey and Long Island. So I'm kind of going to go with the idea that those showers are going to be an issue tomorrow morning. Not everybody gets them. And then after that goes by, weather conditions are going to try to improve. There might be a few scattered showers or storms well inland, but you see how they die out. You got a small patch of rough weather moving across Minnesota and in parts of Iowa. Saturday, some scattered showers and storms in the Carolinas, but much of the nation is really kind of quiet from the standpoint of storm activity. Even down in the areas in the Gulf states and down to Florida, there doesn't seem to be much in the way of flare ups. There'll probably be the usual afternoon pop ups that develop, but not seeing anything even remotely widespread. And why would you? If you've got an east-west ridge covering the entire southern half of the United States, that's going to suppress thunderstorm activity going forward. And I'm moving through now next week. A little bit of flare up now on Thursday, late Thursday. There's a little front here that goes by. Actually, this shows it early Thursday. Maybe it's a bit more like later in the day Thursday. And a little high builds in eastern Canada. Perhaps that will lower temperatures a little bit in the northeast and northern mid-Atlantic states, but everybody else is just going to be in summer mode here. And if you want to just jump ahead to the weekend of the 15th, 16th, there's something pushing eastward. But then again, you know how the variability is in the long range. One of the interesting things, I bet you, if we pull up the accumulated rainfall map over 16 days, it's not going to show too much. I mean, yeah, you do see. I mean, we're talking about three to 5 inches in those pockets there in South Carolina, Georgia, into the Carolinas. But the rainfall amounts here over the next couple of weeks look lacking in most places. The northern parts of Minnesota into Wisconsin, northern with most Wisconsin, the Upper Peninsula, Michigan, a little bit of activity there. That with some of the thunderstorms producing several inches of rain. But again, when you spread that out over 2 weeks plus, it's not a whole lot. And of course, the West is quiet. You got some minor action going on in the lower and middle Mississippi Valley. Again, all of this is just the usual late afternoon diurnal effects that you get with showers and storms. And the Northeast actually is fairly quiet, with many areas in the northern mid-Atlantic to southern through New England showing mostly an inch of rain or less over the next couple. So if you don't get it in the thunderstorm, and for the areas from New Jersey to Long Island, if you don't get it tonight, you are not going to get it. You're not going to get very much in terms of widespread activity. The only thing I would say is that if a tropical system were to pop up somewhere, that could change the equation a little bit. Judging from this on the precip map, this straight line east-west of heavy precip across the intertropical convergence zone, the northern parts of South America, and out into the Pacific, indicate that at least on this particular run, the models probably didn't do very much of anything with regards to tropical cyclone development. And I'll just run this backwards if it lets me. There we go. Just rolling it along. And you'll notice here where the models were doing something is for later next week on prior runs and beyond was out in the Caribbean. But on the last few runs, it looks like they're for the area of this quote unquote gyre is suppressed a bit further to the south, so that any of these tropical waves, they wind up moving out into the Pacific. You see one there on the lower left, and that moves out to the west. So maybe we're just going to have to, I hold we've had a couple of surprises this season with the tropical systems developing, even though the models haven't shown much. And there are definitely a couple of tropical waves that are in the mix here. But for now, I'm just going to enjoy the break. Two tropical storms moving up the East Coast in the last 3.5 weeks. That's something that I can't recall the last time that happened. So I'm just going to come really quick to the chat board. I'm still kind of mentally tired, so I'm not going to be able to carry a show for much longer than this. For much long, for 45 minutes or an hour. And yes, Mrs. Rayo on the chat board tonight pointing out that Joe is quite tired from the cleanup that he had to do. But you have your electricity, and we'll be back together probably tomorrow night. So if I'm just rolling back on the chat. Big hellos to everybody. Appreciate everyone's support through all of this. And I know, Sal, unfortunately, you had your dinner plans changed, I guess, but what can I tell you? Uh, Sal Blandino, it rains, and that's just what happens. The ugly Friday pattern has been in since July 10th. Does any rainy day not kill you, Sal? My God, this ugly Friday pattern has been in since July 10th is killing me. Anytime a drop of rain falls, apparently it's a problem. Uh, but what can you do? By the way, I know a lot of folks are dealing with here on Long Island, and I know in New Jersey. New Jersey got hit so hard with Isaias with this with the winds, and in the western part of the state getting in on some of the heavy rains that occurred. Although the heaviest rains were in eastern Pennsylvania with 6 inches plus. The uh, uh, we need this storm really outperformed. And again, just to go back to what I said earlier, it was that uh, deep trough, that anomalous deep trough that we saw from the Great Lakes down to the Gulf states. That's always something you want to look for a storm to come up the East Coast. You look for that troughing in the eastern half of the U.S. And even though this was moving north-northeast, the trough was far enough west that it allowed the storm to come right along the immediate coast. So that north-northeast turn moved up the coast and just inland of it. And of course, the trough itself, kind of energizing it, keeping the storm strong, was an added plus from the standpoint of the energy being provided. But you always look for that signature if you're forecasting. If you have a ridge in the east, it is not conducive for a storm to turn up the coast. The ridge acts as a brick wall, drives it on a track much further to the west. And we should, by the way, point out that the GFS model on with this wound up being, I think, the big winner on the timing. It was all along that model was much faster than the others, and it was correct. The icon, which I was relying on, it was about 6 hours slower. But the European in particular was so much slower, and it was wrong. It was just wrong in terms of the timing. So the GFS did a very good job with the timing. The European, I think, probably did a better job with the strength of this once it moved through the mid-Atlantic states and on up into the Northeast, because it really grabbed on to the system holding together as it moved northward. And even though it does overdo it, it was producing 90-mile-an-hour wind gusts up in New Jersey and to Long Island. I don't think the wind gusts were quite that high. I mean, we certainly had gusts up into the 60s and 70s, and I think I did happen to see a few odd gusts and unofficial reports of numbers higher. But in general, it was, I would say, if you wanted to lay an average, you had frequent gusts of 50 to 70 miles an hour, and that certainly was enough to do the damage that it did. And hopefully, we're not going to see something like that anytime soon. Johnny Social, how much rain do you think Long Island will get tonight or tomorrow morning? I have to do some more cleaning up. Well, you got some time right now because there's certainly nothing close. There's nothing close by, so anything that falls will be after, I would say, probably after about 3 a.m., 4 a.m., up until about maybe 10 or 11 a.m. in the morning, assuming it holds together. Uh, that would be the threat period, and then weather conditions should improve fairly quickly once that the rain area moves out. It's almost like, as I said, it's a repeat of what we saw last week. James Volpe got hit real hard at his parents in Southern Dutchess. Yes, James, in Ulster County, lights went out, but not too long. I saw a message from my old colleague Brian Fitzgerald, who's up in Dutchess County, and he was actually quite surprised at just how hard they got hit with respect to the winds. The winds were strong and gusty all the way up into the Hudson Valley, and brought those down. Keith James, those are what scale model trains do I have in the background? Those are Lionel. They're O gauge. The big ones, well, relatively big ones. They need the broader curve to get those storms to turn. I've got O27s and the standard O gauge on the Lionels. I think I have altogether about, if I broke my sets up with my engines, I probably have a good 7 sets down here and a ton of cars. But unfortunately, I don't have the room to put them up. But one day I will have the room to put them up, and they will be they will be in there in the shot. Joe Mayano, when will the humidity get comfortable? I mean, really comfortable? You're gonna have to wait for that northern part of that jet stream to come down and push a cold front through, and yeah, that's as we get deeper into August. If that ridge stays flat, you'll probably have some opportunities to get some pushes down from Canada. They've been virtually non-existent in the month of July. We've had the odd day here and the odd day there where we've gotten a little bit of a humidity break. But in terms of something that lasts for more than a day or so, I think we're going to have to wait for the latter part of the month, or at the very least, we're going to have to wait for this pattern to change just a little bit. Big hello to Kenny Salerno, who's on board tonight. Nice to see you there on the chat board. Chuck Cardillo is on tonight. The chairman, Scott Briller, is doing his thing, working, so he isn't here tonight. His mom is uh, having to decide about knee surgery or not, so we wish her all the best. And she took a shot in the knee from the doctor that would alleviate the pain she's having with her knees. Hopefully it lasts, and as I said, we wish you all the best. So Chris Alley, I hope everything turned out okay down in Lindenhurst. One of the upsides for the South Shore of Long Island was the fact that the storm timed out perfectly. By moving faster, it actually came in around low tide, and that minimized coastal flooding to a large extent. Had it not come in until the evening hours, it would have been far worse. With those south winds, there would have been some at least moderate coastal flooding across the south shore of Long Island and along all the south-facing shorelines. So that was one big plus that came out of it. And of course, this is another example. Remember the rule, folks, going forward when you're dealing with your local forecasts. The track, especially up at this latitude, when you get up into the northern mid-Atlantic states, and northward up into New England, if you are left of the storm track or to the west of the track of the center of the tropical system, you're going to get the heaviest rain. If you are, and you will get some wind, but you will get much more wind if you are east of the center, and you will also wind up with far less in the way of rain. So that's usually how it works. And if you look at the loops of Isaias, or the radar loops, as you moved it up along the Florida coast, it was the opposite. And as it got further north, they begin the very slow process of transitioning over into a non-tropical system. And one of the first things that happens is that you see the rain area start to tilt around and rotate around and shift to the western side of the storm, as opposed to what happens on the east. So that's something to remember with future storms, that's what happens as they move northward. So you look for the track. If you're east of the track, you'll get less in the way of rain. So flash flooding would be less of an issue unless you get into some sort of convective situation with some thunderstorms. And fortunately, from that respect, the thunderstorms that developed and lifted up, I did not see any reports of tornadoes in Long Island or Connecticut. There were many tornadoes from southern New Jersey down southward, particularly over the Delmarva Peninsula, where there had to be at least a dozen tornado warnings that I saw, and there probably were a few that I missed when I looked when I was looking at the radar, because sometimes they just pop up for a couple of minutes and then they take them down depending on what the radar is showing. All right, folks, going to wrap it up here at this point. Thanks for being here tonight. Joe should be back tomorrow. I assume he'll be okay. And don't forget, we've got our Sunday morning show, the Joe and Joe Weather Show at 11 o'clock Eastern Time. So mark that down on your calendar. And these shows are also available as podcasts. So if it's easier for you to just listen to them as opposed to watching them on videos, or you're exercising or out for a long walk, you put on your earbuds and you can listen to the Joe and Joe Weather Show while you're doing other things. Okay, have a great day, folks, and a great